Oh my, I had such an inspiring chat with Funlayo Alabi, who is the founder and CEO of Shea Radiance. Shea Radiance was created when Funlayo and her husband noticed that both their young boys had unusually dry skin. When local products failed to resolve the problem, Funlayo tried the Shea Butter she had grown up with in Nigeria, where it has been used for centuries for cooking and medicinal purposes. Guess what? The cream worked on their son's dry skin and a business was born. At Shea Radiance, the company believes that when a woman feels beautiful, she can focus her creative energies on changing the world. I can relate to that. Funlayo talks so openly and in such an authentic manner about her journey through setbacks, adversity, starting from scratch, standing out in a crowded market, and so much more. This discussion is a reminder of why I love what I do, which is building a community of fierce women like you and this amazing lady that I spoke to today. You are in for such a treat. Hey, Funlayo, it's so good to see you. Thank you so much for joining. How are you?
Ugochi, it's great to be here and I am doing well. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Thank you so much. I've already introduced you to the audience, so we'll just kick it off. You just tell
Okay.
us a little bit about yourself. It's usually how I like to kick things off. Talk to the audience, tell us a little bit about you, your background, and everything that you do, who you are. Talk to us.
All right. All right. So my name is Funlayo Alabi, as the audience already knows. I am a co-founder in a company called Shea Radiance. It's a company I started with my husband, Shola. Married. I have two boys. I live in Maryland and I hail from the wonderful continent of Africa by way of Nigeria, by way of Lagos. I was born in the UK and returned back to Nigeria when I was 5, but all my formative years were in Nigeria. And then at the age of 17, my younger sister, who was 15, and I came to the United States to go to college. And so we went to Howard University. And yeah, I'll leave it there for right now because I'm sure you'll find out more about me as we continue the conversation.
We will, and I've already found out. I didn't realize I was born in London as well. I didn't realize you were born in the UK, so that's already something,
Yes,
right?
Manchester.
Oh, I went to the University of Manchester, so
Oh
there
my goodness, look at that.
we'll have to connect and talk more offline. That's
Mhm.
awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So talk us through your journey because we want to dive right in. You know, we know you're a successful entrepreneur. I don't think there are many that don't already know who you are. So talk us through your journey to entrepreneurship. What made you decide to become an entrepreneur? Did you always know growing up that this is what you'd be doing?
That is a really good question. Growing up, I never really knew what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
I knew that I enjoyed meeting different people. I knew that I enjoyed travel. I knew that I enjoyed, when I say different, just a diversity of people and experiences. So even when I was in secondary school in Nigeria, I went to Queen's College. One of the things I love about that experience and even carries on till today is the fact that I had friends from all over Nigeria. So I've always been a celebrator of diversity. In terms of entrepreneurship, I grew up in your typical Nigerian home where my father worked for the state. He was the accountant general, and my mother was a secretary for at an oil company.
Mhm.
But everyone had a side hustle.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
side hustle lifestyle was always there. So fast forward and coming to the States, um, went through Howard, studied business. First of all, started out studying accounting, and I felt that that went against the grain of my very nature. Just because my dad was an accountant didn't mean I had the same gene organization
Yeah.
to do accounting. So by the second year, I was like, Funlayo,
Do
you're not
yeah,
going to make it.
respect yourself. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, yes. So I ended up changing my major to international business
Hmm.
because of that passion to want to see the world and. And so when I finished at Howard, I went to grad school, Christian grad school, where I majored in business also. So I don't know necessarily think all these experiences necessarily prepared me to be an entrepreneur, but I will say that having kids and having to address a problem we had as a family, we have very dry skin, and my kids had eczema, made us start wondering about why there were not enough moisturizing options in the market to take care of our family's dry skin. And so my mother was visiting from Nigeria. We're like, Mom, can you bring us some shea butter? She ended up bringing us like 5 pounds of shea butter.
I love it.
And we used that on the kids' skin and we used it on our skin, and the transformation was amazing. And Ugochi, if I tell you that the shea butter she brought was not the best quality, I think they were, you could see, organic pieces of the streets of Lagos in it, bits of flies and debris. But, in the essence of the butter was exactly what we needed and what we couldn't get. And so that was kind of the foray into entrepreneurship. I was like, if we have this problem and we are solving it, perhaps there are other people who have that same problem. And let's take it out to the world and see how they respond. And that was the beginning.
Awesome. So I can say that I'm a customer of Shea Radiance. I, get it from Roots and Whole Foods. Yeah.
Yes.
So on that note, tell the audience, if there's anyone on the call that doesn't know about your company, talk to us. Tell the audience about Shea Radiance.
All right. So I think what excites me most about what we do is the fact that we create all our formulas from scratch. And we centered shea butter as the key ingredient because shea butter is so amazing. I know that for many of us who grew up in West Africa, I think if you're probably over 40 years old or maybe over 30, you took it for granted, right? Growing up, it was like, oh, it stings. It's this or it's that. I'm going to buy something that is in a bright, shiny package. And, we all kind of, are drawn to really well packaged, well branded body care products. But the truth of the matter is that when we discovered shea butter, we were at the point where Target, Walmart, all those places had failed us. In fact, anytime we used their products on the boys, within 2 hours, they would be like completely ashy. And, most of us mothers don't like our kids going to school looking unkempt. And so I was like, it's not working. And the reason it wasn't working is because when you read the back panel of a lot of these lotions and creams, it's every kind of filler, but what you really need.
Yeah.
And even if they're putting it in, it's in such a low amount. And what I found was that they're not making lotions for brown skinned people. Because when you're brown, living in the Western Hemisphere, whether it's the UK or America, this weather can wreak havoc on your skin and leave you looking and feeling dry. And so we create all our formulations with that in mind. So using shea butter as the base, we add other ingredients to it to create what we call the whipped butters, right? So we have the raw shea butter, which you're probably getting from Roots.
Yes.
And then if you want to elevate the experience, if that's even possible, you can buy our whipped butters. They're much softer. They include cocoa butter, rice bran oil. And then for those who struggle with extreme dry skin or if their kids have eczema, we put colloidal oats because it's super good for the skin. So like just 4 or 5 simple ingredients, we whip it together, fill the jar, and then send it off to the stores. And then we also learned how to make creams. And so we can also make shea butter cream, which has lots of good shea butter. It has water and an emulsifier for those who want something lighter. So like I was saying, the shea butter, because it's such an integral part of the brand, we source it directly from the continent. So part of my passion to travel was really satisfied when we had to start sourcing ingredients. And so I had the privilege of traveling to parts of Nigeria that I never went to when I was in Nigeria, like going north and then going west to like Shaki and Kwara and all those areas, right? got to go to Mali, got to go to Ghana, Ivory Coast, and now we're sourcing from Benin. And so we bring the raw ingredient in directly from the co-ops of women who produce them, and then we use them in all our manufacturing here. So when you support Shea Radiance, you're supporting a whole community of women farmers who are plugged into our supply chain.
And I think that's so amazing. And that's a key thing. I'm so glad you called that out, because there are a lot of consumers or customers who that's really important to them, right? So that's good. So they can enjoy your products. And it is an elevated experience. I'm not quite sure how you elevate it beyond what I'm buying with your Shea Butter. But just knowing that you're buying something that's of such high quality, but you're also helping is just so amazing. And the fair trade practices are awesome. So I'd love for you to maybe talk. This is a question as you were talking, I hadn't thought about until you started talking. Where would you say, and I don't know if this is a fair question, I'm just curious, where would you say the best quality shea butter that you've sourced has come from, or does that not necessarily apply?
It varies. It varies. The Nigerian shea butter is very rich. Like the shea butter you would get from that Oyo Shaki going into Niger State. It's softer, it's full of olein. So the what impacts shea butter, of course, is the topography, the kind of rainfall, and what is in the land. And so the shea butter that comes from Nigeria is softer. It has more of an olein content, right? Because shea has both olein and stearin. And I feel like that makes it really good for cosmetic manufacturing. But it also lends itself to getting rancid very quickly. Okay.
Yes.
And it has more of a camphory smell, but it's really good. It's great at stimulating the collagen. With all the eczema issues and inflammations, it's super good because of the high olein content. When you go into Ghana, the shea butter has a sweet cocoa smell that is just, yeah. I mean, when the women are processing, you're like, who is processing cocoa?
Chocolate, yes.
Yeah, but for some reason, there's the chemical composition kind of exudes, cocoa in it. They have more stearin than olein in their cocoa butter, so it's a lot firmer, and it tends to have a longer shelf life. But because it's also unrefined, like the one we're buying from Nigeria, it has all those healing properties. And then Benin is kind of like a balance between the two. So having said that, I'm biased. I love them all. They all have good qualities that I love.
Of course. I love that. That's so, so interesting. You could talk about this, and I know you can, right? This is your passion. Talk about it for ages. But, it's interesting. If we segue a little bit into the business side, and then I'd love to come back to the family side, because you are a mother of two boys, and talk about how you balance that, which is a question I'm sure the audience will have. But as we talk a little bit more about the business, what kinds of methods or strategies have you used to build your business that are maybe unconventional, or that people may think are surprising?
All right. So in the early years, I didn't have a business plan. I just would write down all my ideas about what I wanted. I was more drawn by the aspiration of what I wanted the business to be. So in my notebooks, I would write, I didn't like the fact that the body shop was telling our stories, about, raw ingredients. It's like, I or someone like me should be telling the stories of where this came from, because we know what it's like, growing up with shea butter and how our grandmother mixed it, and all the interesting ways that our people use it. So I was driven more by the vision than the business, right? So that's kind of unconventional.
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to build a brand. I didn't just want to sell shea butter, because everybody was already selling shea butter, and they could do it so much inexpensively than I did. I wanted to build a brand that meant something. And so even from day one, we were investing a lot in our packaging and branding, the best that we could with the amount of money that we had. We always wanted it to be a lot more than just shea butter. So,
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, because when I, your brand, and this is on because I've always been a fan of Shea Butter, especially after I had the twins with the stretch marks and everything. And I used to buy it just raw and unrefined. Your brand was the first time that I actually saw Shea Butter as a luxe product, if that makes sense, right? Because we're so used to being in Nigeria or even just being here and going to the African store to get it or whatever, or having people bring it, to your point about the debris of the streets of Lagos. You see it as this sort of, it works and it's great, but there's nothing glamorous or beautiful about it. It's just slap it on and it works. Your brand was the first time I was like, this is packaged so nicely. It's actually a luxe brand, right? So it's interesting that you talk to that because obviously your vision really, really came through, But can you share a story about when you took a significant risk that paid off in your journey?
Oh my goodness. I think my journey has always been about risk,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember when we started the business and we started off, first of all, figuring out, okay, friends and family were stopping by the house to grab jars of butter for their kids' eczema prone skin.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always believed that, you only really have a business when people are willing to pay for what you're putting out there, because people will take free stuff, whether it's good or bad, and, put it under their sink or use it or whatever. But, really having the courage to take your service or your product, which I'll call your baby, out into the market and see if anyone else wants it. That's one of the biggest steps of faith that I find entrepreneurs have to make. Because I also meet a lot of entrepreneurs who all their dreams are in that notebook I was talking to you about, and they have it sketched out, finessed, planned, but they never acted on it, right? And so one of my biggest moves was to sign up at a farmer's market in Olney. And when we were accepted into the market, to take our tablecloth and put the shea butter out there and see if people would buy. And it wasn't an easy experience. It was a diverse market, but it was mostly white people. They didn't know about shea butter. Now, why would I go to Olney of all places, to go and sell it? Why couldn't I have gone somewhere else? But I just, in my mind, I was like, this product is for a diverse audience. So I want to see if I can educate. And so was it Sunday or Saturday? It was Sunday morning. And we also did one on Saturday. So my husband will take the kids to church on Sunday, and then everyone will come back and meet me at the farmer's market, and we would sell and close out. We would be there just talking to people about Shea. We had our signage. I would rub it on people's hands, and we slowly built up a very loyal clientele from the local farmer's market. But making that step out was one of the hardest. And I'll tell you, the next hardest step was when we started getting a little bit of traction. My husband and I would be up all night filling jars, doing all these crazy things, and then doing the farmer's market the next day. And I was working in DC. And during the time I was working in DC, I would also travel with all kinds of USAID sponsored projects, to the Shea Parklands and all this. And I remember coming back to work one day and sitting in a meeting, and people were talking about all these technical things. And I was like, I am wasting my life. Yeah. I need to, if I want to elevate this business beyond a hobby, I am going to have to put my entire self and my entire time into it. And so the next big leap was quitting my job and doing Shea Radiance full time. And those were the two biggies: selling my first product face to face, and then transitioning from my job. It is not something I recommend for anyone till you are completely ready. Please do not use this as an excuse to quit your job. It was risky, and I was just determined that I was going to make it work, even though we were not financially ready for that move.
Yes. Yeah. So I was going to ask you, but I'm glad you clarified, because of course I was going to say there are people in the audience who are taking that slow step into entrepreneurship. It may be as a side business, and hearing you, they may be like, oh, maybe. So my question was going to be, right, when is the right time? And of course, you already clarified it may not be the right. Don't take this as a reason to quit, go in on Monday and quit your job and be stuck. I love that. But I also wanted to ask you before we move on, because you said something else about your first selling your first product. And I know I know exactly where that farmer's market is, selling. And it wasn't, at least at the time, I'm sure, not as diverse as maybe it is today. Mm-hmm. So the first time you showed up at the farmer's market, I'm assuming, or maybe you were even blessed that you had a sale on the first day, but it could be that you did not. What was that feeling like in the beginning? So selling your first products, like one person is interested. If one person is interested, maybe two, maybe five, maybe 10, etc. But until you had that one and you're out there selling, what was going through your head? What was going through your mind? Was it hard? Was it like, oh no, this is not working, nobody cares? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
So, yes, it is scary. And honestly, yes, you're going to stand there and people are going to walk by you. And, you've put all your signage up and you're hoping that people see, you. And then there are people trying not to make eye contact as they're walking by. And I would tell myself that, you know what? I'm here to build relationships.
Yes.
I'm here to just tell people what I have. Mm-hmm. I brought like little samples that if someone would at least make eye contact, I would put it in their hands and then draw them into the booth. And so I became less focused even on the sale. I was just focusing on if I can connect with more people. If I can just talk to them, maybe if I can tell them one thing about where Shea Butter comes from, or maybe I can put it on their hands and they can see and feel. So I focus less on the selling and more on the people, how I can help them. Like, maybe if I told her about this, because I know Shea Butter is really good for burns. And I know these people are going to roast themselves by the seaside very soon. Maybe I can, tell them about that. And it was really, when I started looking at it more as a relationship, I was able to relax more. And the person who actually bought the first product, I didn't even really talk that much to. They were just ready and they came and they bought. And it's so funny. One of my greatest customers was a red-haired Russian woman who would come at the end of the market with her fiery, beautiful red hair. And she would come and scoop up like 5 or 6 boxes, expecting me to give her a 20% discount because she came late and she's helping me. So it's just amazing. A lot of serendipitous things happen when you just kind of put yourself out there.
Yeah, that's so awesome. The light bulbs kind of went off for me, and I'm hoping as the audience is listening, that's the same for them. When you said that you focused less on the sale and more on the people or the relationship building, I think that same principle applies with anything, right? Whether the audience is selling online, whether it's more of an e-commerce type product, or whether it's digital services, or whether it's a physical product, taking your mind off of the sale and focusing more on the relationships and your people is such a nugget. I'm so glad I asked that follow-on question. Awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you. So I'd love to really ask you, because I know you talked about having 2 boys. I know you're a mother. And how do you balance it? First of all, how old are your sons? And I'm sure they were younger when you started, of course. So how did you balance it then? And how do you balance it now? I'd love to hear that.
Wow. So when they were much younger, my oldest is now 25. My youngest is 17. And we had already kind of started a lot of these things even before the business launched, when my youngest was maybe about 2, right? He was 2. And my oldest then, he had a lot of medical issues also. He was a kidney transplant recipient. He had been a very sick child. So we had one child with all these special needs, and then another one that it looks like he was just born with eczema all over his body. So both my boys were very high maintenance. And so how did we keep it balanced? I think at that season in life, where business was beginning to pick up and we were spending lots of nights making products and everything, I didn't have the luxury of subscribing to a lot of Western traditions of, here's the strict bedtime, because my kids just didn't fit into that mold. So Tolu, I will tell you, there are pictures of me with him strapped on my back, trying to get him to sleep while I was filling orders, because I couldn't really spend the time, kind of talking him through, why you need to be in bed and everything. So I would say that being an immigrant and seeing the different ways our parents and grandparents had raised kids and they didn't turn out to be axe murderers gave me a lot of permission that I could do different things while trying to build this business and my kids would turn out all right. So it was like a mental switch for me that, they're going to be fine.
And the thing you called out is they've grown with your business. So they
Yes.
see, they're right in there with it. They understand the sacrifices, the discipline, the work ethic, the passion. They understand it all, which is great. So you just took them along with you, strapped them to your back, filled orders, made it seem easy, even though I'm sure it was really
Yes.
difficult, right?
Yes, and even at the farmers market, when they would, because we went to a church which was about a couple of miles from the farmers market. After church, they would run to the market. They would play there. They got to meet a lot of really great people like Carla Hall from what's that cooking show? She was at the market. They got to take pictures with her. So the farmers market became like an after church activity for them, where they literally grew up there. After a while, my older son was the one directing traffic for the market. So
Oh, that's amazing. That's
yeah.
awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. I love stories like this. They really speak to family and community and all the wholesome things that we know about, right? So, speaking about sacrifice and discipline, I'm sure even though you're successful today, I'm sure there's been some setback, some mistakes, some failure. And I'm always interested to hear those because I think that's where some of the real nuggets are uncovered. So with that, I'd love to know what is in your mind the most unexpected lesson that you've learned from a failure or a setback in your business? Talk to us.
Oh my goodness. So I would still go back to this experience because it's one of the biggest ones. And this was where Shola and I had to decide if we were going to continue or not. Within about 2 years after I left my full-time job, and obviously that was a sacrifice and did put a strain on the family, but we were managing. We had an awesome opportunity to get our products picked up by Target.
Nice.
They had attended an event, a show I was doing. We typically do really nice, interesting looking displays. Nothing over the top, but I guess the way we had it merchandise caught the buyer's eye, and they reached out to us and told us that they wanted to bring Shea Radiance into Target. Now, this was many years ago. This was when the natural movement was just beginning, so we were kind of a little bit ahead of the curve. Now, Ugochi, one of the things I'll tell you is that even though I feel like we make amazing lotions and when it comes to branding, we have all that down, we were still very naive about what it really took to build a brand, right? We always prayed that we would get picked up by Whole Foods. And of course, Target was the ultimate goal. And it happened so quickly within when I started building the business. And we didn't realize the financial requirements that you needed to have in place before saying yes to a big box store. So naively, we were like, yes, we figured out how much the purchase order would be. We knew it was going to be profitable based on our margins. And we're like, this is an answer to prayer. It's a no-brainer. We're going to do this, right? Now that I know what I know, if you want to launch into a big box store, you need to at least have $500,000 to $250,000 just to get you through the first year of launching, because it's crazy expensive. And we were bootstrapping. And so when Target picked us up and we filled the first purchase order, it was amazing. It was a lot of work. We made it happen. We even had a launch party. Everyone knew that Shea Radiance is in Target. Aren't they great? Such a brilliant couple, an example of how, we can be in a big box store. And we were very proud because, not in a bad way, but we knew it was an amazing accomplishment. It meant that we had done something well. It meant that we had been noticed.
Of course.
But what we didn't know was that that was just step one of many steps to what it took to be successful in retail.
Wow.
We didn't realize that we needed a budget to market the heck out of our product, because even though you're sitting on the shelves of Target, you need to send your customers into Target to buy your stuff.
Wow.
Yes. So I
Wow.
always felt like, Target is my go-to place. I'm always in Target. I'm always buying. Well, if people are not looking for you, they're not going to find you if you're not telling them that you're there.
Wow.
And then when you launch into a store, there are lots of logistical things that happen too. Within the first couple of months, the product was not stocked, or they would stock it and it would be on the bottom shelf. It was just crazy. And within about 9 months, we were failing. We were running out of money. The sales were not great. They couldn't find the product, or they mislabeled the product. All these things that typically, when they happen and you're well financed, or for the larger brands, they're able to kind of roll with it, that, okay, this is normal, because they know the boat will right itself maybe in 18 to 24 months.
Wow.
But for us, we were just drowning. They would run a promotion or sale, which ends up coming out of our pockets, and I'll be like, oh my God, don't let anybody buy anything, because we're going to be broke.
Wow.
So it was really it was a perverse situation, just because we were not prepared.
Yeah.
And so within a year, we realized that this opportunity is a nightmare. It's a nightmare because we're not ready, and because of how traditional retail works. It wasn't set up to be friendly to small businesses, and certainly not businesses like ours. And so in a little over a year, Target said, we're going to pull you off the shelf. And when they do that, they don't just take you off the shelf. If you fail in retail, you pay for the honor to be pulled off the shelf.
What?
Yes. And if they put you in that clearance basket and they're selling you for 75% off, they're still going to make their money from you. You pay them back. Yes.
Wow.
So we went through that whole thing. And at the end of it, Shola and I looked at each other. We were completely devastated. And we're like, should we even continue doing this? We've obviously failed very badly. And we just kind of took stock of, what we were doing, talked to a couple of advisors. The advisors told us that, when we're looking at everything, you guys don't have anything left. But, one of the things that kind of made us kind of rethink the business was the why. We were talking yesterday about first things.
Yes.
And one of the reasons we started the business was to solve problems. We did have customers who really loved what we were selling. And now they were not enough to bail us out of all the trouble we're in, but they were there. We had a number of independent stores that were very loyal to us. And then we also had a community we were working with in Nigeria that we had promised that we would always buy from them. Because one of the things the women had told us when we visited, they're like, yeah, all you people are always coming from abroad and taking pictures and saying this and that. And we know how it is. You never come back. That, look, inside this hut, I have 5 huge bags of nut that someone from abroad said that they were going to buy. It's still sitting here. They haven't paid me and they haven't come. And so we were always like, no, we're not going to be that kind of partner that as we grow our brand, we'll continue to work with you. And so I was just thinking about all the promises we made and this and that. And so we decided that, instead of just bowing out and me going back and getting a job and continuing our lives like it never happened, that we were going to stick it out. And Ugochi, sticking it out meant starting from scratch. It meant that I had to be okay with the fact that even though we had done this huge store launch and, papers had picked up and everything, that I had to humble myself back to, I have to start building this. I had to start going from store to store to store to kind of recover some of the accounts that we'd lost. I had to, we had to get used to not having everything that we wanted, and just really slowly and organically begin to build the business back up. And it's so funny when I think about it. I used to be so embarrassed about how we had failed. And that embarrassment almost made me lose my voice. But I was like, but you know what? If you're going to build a business and build it authentically, this is my life. We had this really ugly car that used to fill with water. And because we couldn't afford to fix something in there. And I know at one time someone invited me to speak somewhere. And I was like, why are people inviting me to speak? Yeah. I don't have any reason to tell you anything because I am parking my car down the road because the thing is leaking, But part of it was also God saying, this is your journey.
Yeah.
You're going to keep showing up. Yeah. You're going to do what you need to do. And you're not going to pretend to be more than what you are. So deal with it.
Yeah.
And so that's been my journey. That's been my journey. I still don't even feel like we're completely done with it. But that is really part of my journey and part of my story.
Oh my gosh, I love this. It's so, so authentic. And, what you describe as you failed, and I know you know this, but I wanted to call it out, because when you're going through it, it can seem like a failure, but it's not. It's not. It's just I don't even know what to call it. It's an experience that is a nugget of information for someone else, right? It's an experience that prepares you for your next level. And this is so good. Thank you for sharing that. So good and so authentic too, because you never really know what people are going through behind the scenes. Because through it all, I've known you for a while. I've admired you from far. I've always seen you as someone who's graceful and so so dignified and so poised and meanwhile you're on the
I'm like a duck paddling. Yes.
Yeah, and I do remember when you launched in Target, and I just thought, oh my gosh, she's so amazing. And honestly, it's a lesson to other people too, because sometimes we can be so, and I'm speaking about myself, so aware of, oh my gosh, it didn't work. People will see that it didn't work, but all people see is success. Because to me, it's like, oh, you went from Target to Whole Foods to Roots. There was no failure in there. You see what I mean? Whereas all this stuff is going on behind the scenes. So I'm so glad you shared such an amazing story. Thank you. As we continue, I do want to know though, because you talked about the different types of, the raw, the elevated experience, and then the creams. And I know you have different flavors, like you have I think it's the apricots and things like that, right? So I know you're continually innovating. I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about that, right? How do you innovate? How do you get fresh ideas? Where do you go for inspiration? I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Oh, that's such a lovely question. So inspiration, innovation, one of the things I don't take for granted is the fact that I am from Africa and that I am from Nigeria and that I am a global citizen because I get my inspiration from just the variety of things I have experienced in my life. So when I started traveling to the different co-ops and I saw how the women were extracting the butter and, what happened with the finished product, it was there that I was inspired to make sure that if I ever sold a raw butter product, it would never be rock-like, that it would have that smoothness of, the molecules being relaxed so that you could just easily scoop them out. So it seems like a really simple thing, but those are the things you see and observe. I get my inspiration from food, right? So I go to trade shows to learn and to get educated. But one of the ones I plan on going to is the Fancy Food Show in New York, because I find that food inspires my creative abilities. I always feel like shea butter based products, because shea butter is also a food, right? In the villages, the women saute with shea butter. So kind of having those ideas in mind, you're like, okay, so what are they doing with olive oil? What are the Indians doing with ghee? How can I incorporate different things that are happening globally into what we are creating in Shea Radiance? And then the other thing that serves as inspiration is my journey as a woman, as a middle-aged African woman. I am through menopause, going through the next phase. My skin is still dry, and so I'm learning about new ways of creating the product that addresses that dryness in mature skin. And then I'm also working on a skincare line right now that is all about keeping the skin glowing. Aging is an honor, right?
Yeah.
It's a blessing, because not to age means you would be dead. But I just want to go into my 60s and 70s looking and feeling amazing. And so I'm looking at different ingredients to keep that melanin popping, deal with hyperpigmentation. And if I'm going to wrinkle, I want my wrinkles to glow.
Yes.
And I know a lot of women feel that way. So those are where my inspiration, the many areas where I get my inspiration.
And speaking of food, speaking of being, I don't know if I'd call you middle aged, being in midlife, as our friend Kwabi talks
Yes,
about.
Kwabi,
Right?
yes, she'll set me straight on that.
Yeah. Talking about looking amazing, which you do.
Thank
I
you.
want to ask you, while I have you, how do you show up looking so fabulous? I know you eat healthy because I follow you on Instagram. You talk about
I
health.
try.
Taking care of yourself.
Yes.
Talk to the audience a little bit about that, because people will see you and be like, goals. So tell us about that.
So one of the things I found, and I think this is in alignment with, some of the principles, when you deconstructed fears, and you were talking about the energy, the engine part of it, that resonated. So in my 40s, when I was beginning to go into that perimenopausal, I went early. I was moody. All kinds of things were going on. And my doctor also did my lab work and said, you're pre-diabetic. Right?
Oh, okay.
Yes. So, and even before that, I've always been a rather slim person.
Yes.
I had a slim frame. And so it was at that point in my life that I realized that, okay, God has built you however he has built you. But if you want to stay healthy, if you want to stay functional, then you're going to have to be intentional about how you care for yourself. Funlayo of 20 and 30 and 36 she's not happening anymore. If you if you want to, you have to really be intentional. When I was younger, I could eat bars of chocolate, drink Coke, and I would still look and feel fine. If I eat chocolates, right, as much as I love it, you'll be able to see it under my eyes. It's so unfair. Yes, it's like my body just doesn't deal.
Yeah.
And so, so thank you for the kind words, but I've had to be intentional about how I eat, right? I've had to be intentional about eating well, and I especially like to lean into a lot of our traditional Nigerian foods. If I go to any of my friends who are Igbo and they're making those greens, I'm like, load it on my plate, and maybe I'll have just a little bit of rice to go with it, but I will max out on the veggies. I do exercise. I find that it helps my mind. I started doing yoga, which a lot of people think is very controversial. I like the hot yoga because it allows me to stretch with less impact on my joints. I'm constantly changing what I'm doing as I get older to find what really works for me. So, thank you for those kind words. But I'm intentional about it, because I think once you get into your 40s, you can't just hope
Yes.
that everything will be like it was in your 30s. You literally have to work. And why do we work on it? So we can be around for those we love, so that we can successfully build our businesses and enjoy the fruits of our labor, so that we can be a blessing to others. God can only walk through this. Once this breaks down, you're going home.
Yes.
So I want to be a good steward of the temple.
Amazing, amazing. So yeah, they may be kind words, but they are true. So
Oh,
thank
thank
you for
you.
giving us a little bit of a snippet of your secrets. Very much appreciated. As we start to round up, maybe you could share with us some words of wisdom. So when you said you started your business, there were already people doing shea butter, however they were doing it in its raw stage or whatever. It kind of reminded me of a lot of people in entrepreneurship today, or a lot of people, to your point, who have their ideas in notebooks but never execute. The most common excuse that I hear, actually, and I've heard a few, is usually everybody is doing it, right?
Mhm.
Or there are already people doing it. Some variation of that same thing. Right? Already people doing it. So whatever I'm doing is not unique, right? What would you say to people who would come up with that kind of excuse based on your experience? How does one, regardless of what they're doing, stand out in what is a crowded marketplace, regardless of what it is you're trying to bring to birth? Does that resonate?
I mean, the product might not be unique, the solution might not be unique, but you are.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
are. No one can do it like you. And there are
Hmm.
people who have been walking by this very unique solution product that haven't looked because you haven't presented yours,
Hmm.
right? And maybe there are some people who would have never tried shea butter if Funlayo and Shea Radiance hadn't come on the scene.
Exactly.
And there's so many people in the world. There's so many solutions that people are looking for that they haven't found, even though there are abundant of
Hmm.
things out there. So I would say that you are the X factor, and nobody can do what you do. And the more you know yourself, the more you can be yourself, and that affects everything that you do. So don't let the fact that everybody is doing it scare you. How are you going to do it?
Hmm.
Every time I present to a store, they always say, okay, who are your competitors? And from a business point of view, yes, you should know who your competitors, who are you sharing the shelf with? If you go into Whole Foods, there's Alafia, there's Shea Moisture, there might be one or two other brands. But I know what makes me unique without having to take them down. And they're
Hmm.
all doing great work. Alafia always ordered his shea butter from Togo. He was an inspiration to me. He showed me that it could be done.
Hmm.
But when I sell shea butter, I'm selling it uniquely from a woman's lens. I am selling women shea butter luxury. I'm selling self care. I'm hoping when they connect into the brand and they come to my Instagram that they get to hear from amazing women like you. So we're selling an entire wellness self care experience to women that even transcends shea butter.
Yeah.
And that is how people should be thinking about their service and their product. That yes, everybody might be doing, but what is uniquely you that you are going to bring that no one else can do?
Mm.
Yeah.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. So, last question. Is there anything you'd like to share with the audience before we close, or is there anything you were hoping I would ask you?
Oh my God, I think you've asked me everything. I would share one thing is don't be afraid of competition.
Mm.
Don't be afraid to collaborate
Yes.
with others, right? You don't lose anything by even helping your competition,
Mm.
because there's so much room, so much abundance. And, let's start thinking more expansively. If I help another shea butter seller find jars, or I tell her where I'm getting my caps from or who makes my labels, it doesn't reduce or diminish me in any way. So I want
Mhm.
to encourage women especially to not be afraid of collaborating and sharing. You don't lose, you actually gain by
Yeah.
being a blessing. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Such wise words of wisdom. Thank you so much, Funlayo. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Gochi, thank you for having me on. This has been such a delight. Thank you.